This happened a few weeks ago. I was working late at my design studio in that old, abandoned factory. I'd been there for years, but the late shifts were really getting to me. It felt like I was trapped in a cycle of deadlines. My recent breakup didn't help either. I was trying to forget. On the fourth night, I noticed something odd. Strange sketches were scattered on my desk. They had faces with big features, staring at me. I didn't remember drawing them. Maybe I was just tired. I pushed them aside, thinking it was harmless. Little did I know, I was about to lose my grip on reality. The next night, I returned and found more sketches. They were on my desk again. The new faces looked twisted in a way. I felt a knot in my stomach. The shadows were darker. I thought I heard someone whisper my name, but it was just the heater making noise. I told myself it was my imagination. On the sixth night, I was trying to focus when I saw something move in the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. A chill ran down my spine. I felt uneasy. The sketches piled up, each one worse than the last. Were they trying to tell me something? I didn't know what was happening. My anxiety grew. I felt like I was losing it. By the seventh night, I was a mess. I struggled to keep my eyes open. I finished my work and looked down. More sketches were there. My heart raced as I picked one up. The face changed again. It looked like it was crying. I dropped it, trembling. Then I heard it again. Emily, it felt close, echoing around the room. I pushed my chair back and stood up. I scanned the shadows. They were twisting in the dim light. I felt cold and scared, but I couldn't leave. It was like the studio was holding me captive. Finally, I asked the empty room, "What do you want from me?" I didn't expect an answer, but then I saw a shadow by the window. I took a step forward, heart pounding. When I turned around, there it was. A face. But it wasn't any of the sketches. It was blank. Just an empty space. I backed away. It felt like something was watching me. This thing knew my name, but I didn't know who or what it was. I felt trapped. I looked around for a way out. My heart was racing. I thought about running, but my feet wouldn't move. Something was pressing down on me, and the silence felt thick. I felt like I was on the edge of madness. The sketches piled on my desk. Who drew them? Why did they haunt me? Then, I saw movement again. Shadows flickered on the walls. Emily, it whispered again. I wanted to scream. I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to escape, but the room felt like a cage. The factory felt alive, and I was just a guest. I didn't belong there. I didn't remember falling asleep, but everything went black for a moment. When I opened my eyes, the studio was dark, save for the faint glow of my computer screen. I forced myself to breathe. My heart still raced, and the sense of something lurking sent chills down my spine. I looked around, trying to shake off the weight of dread. Then I noticed it again, the sketches were gone. Instead, there was a large, single drawing in the center of my desk. It was a face. No features, just emptiness. I froze. I couldn't understand how it had appeared there. My hand trembled as I reached for it. Just then, another whisper cut through the silence. Emily, it was louder this time, urgent. I felt ice pool in my stomach. I jerked back, and my chair almost tipped over. Sweat broke out on my forehead. I had to get out. I stood up, but the shadows danced around me, thicker than before. I made my way to the door, but a sound stopped me cold. A crumpling noise from behind. I turned slowly, scanning the edges of the room. A sketchbook lay open, pages flipping in a draft that shouldn't have been there. At that moment, the studio felt alive, almost as if it had its own intentions. It was no longer just a space filled with my designs. It felt hostile. In horror, I approached the sketchbook. Was it all part of this twisted game? I flipped through the pages, and my breath hitched. Each page screamed of anguish, faces losing their shapes, faces that seemed to fade and come back as I stared. This wasn't just imagination anymore, it felt like a narrative, a story that shouldn't exist. The faces, I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. I dug through the rapidly flipping pages, desperate to find something, anything that made sense. Then, I stopped. One of the sketches caught my eye. It was a face I recognized, but it was twisted and distorted. The resemblance was unmistakable. It was me. Panic inundated my senses. I stumbled back as a low, acrid laugh reverberated through the room. It chilled me to the bone. My mind raced. Had I drawn that? Why? And why did it look so haunted? I was losing it. The sketches were starting to consume me. I headed for the exit, but before I reached the door, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Cold, ice cold. Emily, the name resonated in my bones. I spun around, terror flooding me. There it was again, the blank face. But this time, it seemed to shift and waver, as if the emptiness were filling with dark intent. I felt paralyzed, unable to scream or move, just caught in the grip of the unknown. Then, the lights flickered. I heard thudding sounds from somewhere deeper in the factory, echoes reverberating through the walls. Someone or something was inside with me. I had to get out. Desperation flooded my veins. But as I rushed toward the exit, shadows converged upon me. I stumbled, the sensation of being pulled back inching closer. I resisted, planted my feet, but the nightmares weren't finished with me yet. Wasn't there some way to fight this? Then everything went dark. When I woke, I was sprawled on the floor, the studio dim and eerily quiet. My head throbbed, and I struggled to push myself up. The cold, hard concrete felt strangely comforting, grounding me in a world that had spun out of control. Panic pressed against my chest. I needed to leave this place. As I stood, I noticed the shadows had receded, but they still hung at the edges of every corner, like anxious onlookers ready to pounce. My breath came quicker as I glanced to my desk. The drawing was gone, and so was the sketchbook that had haunted me moments before. I forced myself to step away from the desk. A part of me wanted to look again, to know what else might have appeared in my absence. But the whispers echoed in my mind, urging me not to linger. I edged towards the door, fingers brushing against the wall for support. Just before I reached the exit, a sudden crash echoed from somewhere deeper inside the factory. I froze, my heart racing anew. I had to decide. Should I investigate the noise or escape while I still had a chance? My instincts screamed for me to run, yet curiosity pulled at me just as fiercely. Cursing myself for being indecisive, I turned back toward the source of the sound. A long, dark hallway stretched out before me, illuminated only by flickering overhead lights. The shadows seemed to beckon, calling me into their depths. I moved cautiously, each step reverberating in the silence. It felt as if the building had a heartbeat, slow, heavy thuds encompassing me. In the distance, I thought I heard someone whispering my name again. Emily. There was a strange familiarity to it, a tone that was both inviting and threatening. The hallway branched into two. One side led further into the heart of the factory, and the other seemed to wind back toward my studio. My instincts pulled me back, but I felt almost compelled to explore the passage of darkness. I wanted answers: who was calling me, and why? As I stepped down the corridor to my right, I noticed an old door, slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. A sense of urgency surged. That could be the way out. But as I approached, an unsettling sound made me halt. It was laughter, low and twisted, echoing from the bright room. I felt my hands grow cold. Part of me wanted to retreat, flee the laughter that filled the air with dread. But the need to face whatever lay behind that door ignited a fire inside me. I pushed the door open slowly, the hinges creaking painfully, revealing a cluttered room filled with old canvases stacked against the walls. In the center of the room stood a tall figure, back turned, tracing something on an easel. I squinted, trying to gather details. Before I could utter a word, that haunting voice spun around. "Finally, Emily. I've been waiting for you." Everything inside me dropped, the familiarity of the figure made my stomach twist. I recognized the face. It was me, but not the same me. My pulse raced and panic surged again. There was nowhere left to run. I stood frozen, questioning if I had stepped back into my own nightmare. Then, the world swirled around me once more, and I found myself caught in the same dark void. I stumbled forward, enveloped in darkness, my breath caught in my throat. The void spun around me, relentless, tugging at my consciousness. Suddenly, I felt the cold concrete beneath my feet again. I was back in the factory, but everything felt disjointed. The laughter echoed again, breaking the silence and jolting me into a more alert state. I glanced around, searching for the source. The air was thick, almost electric, and whispers twisted through the stillness, calling my name again, Emily. The room I had just entered seemed to shimmer at the edges as if it was fading in and out of existence. I realized I was still standing in front of my doppelganger. I was still at the easel, each stroke of the brush deliberate yet frantic. I was taken aback. The canvas was covered with a blur of colors and shades, depicting strange faces twisted in agony. "What are you doing?" I managed to ask, my voice shaky and small. The figure turned, her eyes hollow, swirling with the same chaos I felt inside. "I'm capturing the truth, Emily. The faces, they must be seen." She stepped closer, paint-smeared hands reaching out. "You can help me. I need you to understand." Every instinct in me screamed to run, but curiosity rooted me to the spot. "Understand what? You think you were just in this place by chance? These faces, they're part of you. They've been trapped within us, waiting for someone to release them." I shook my head, backing away slowly. A storm of emotions crashed within me. "I don't want any part of this." Her laughter changed, sharp and piercing. "Too late, Emily. It's already begun." A sudden pull in my gut forced me to look at the canvases stacked against the walls. They were filled with eerie, distorted versions of my own face, all wide-eyed and gaunt, each portraying raw fear and despair. It felt like they were watching me, their eyes drawn into my soul. "See? They're waiting for you to recognize them." And then, as if responding to that very moment, the light flickered wildly, plunging us into shadows. I felt it then, a cold presence slither around me, heavy and suffocating, rising from the depths of that laughter. Panic seized me as shadows writhed around my feet, inching closer. I had no choice. I turned and ran, the door behind me slamming shut with a resounding crack, leaving me alone in the dim light of the hall. I sprinted down the corridor, the laughter echoing behind me, a sinister melody urging me forward. My heart pounded louder in that silence, and I could feel the shadows beckoning me to look back. But I couldn't. The darkness was alive, chasing me, pressing heavy on my chest. Then I spotted another door at the end of the hallway, a brighter light spilling from beneath it. Maybe it led outside. Maybe it held safety. I rushed towards it, desperation fueling my speed. But as I reached out for the handle, a chilling voice whispered directly into my ear, "You can't escape what you are." That sudden realization hit me like a brick. Was I truly running away from my own reflection, my own nightmare? The thought was chilling, grounded in the awareness that turning back might be the only way to free myself. When I pushed open the door, I didn't know what waited for me. But I was ready to face the truth, no matter how terrifying. The door creaked open, and I stepped through, bracing myself for whatever lay ahead. I stumbled into a small, dimly lit room. Dust hung thick in the air, and the walls were lined with unfinished canvases, each portraying a familiar horror story, a tragedy echoing my own thoughts. I blinked, trying to make sense of the place. The light flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock my every move. My breath came quick, as I scanned the space. At the far end, I spotted a desk cluttered with brushes and paint tubes, as if someone had just left in a hurry. As I approached the desk, I noticed something strange. A piece of paper lay atop it, blank except for a few smudges of paint. But on closer inspection, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The smudges began to form images, faces twisting in anguish, much like the ones I saw in the other room. My breath caught in my throat. Hadn't I just left a version of this? I picked up the paper, staring at it as if it held answers. That S when I saw it, a name scrawled in the corner. Evelyn. It sent a jolt through me. Who was Evelyn? I hadn't heard that name since I didn't want to think about it. A noise behind me made me spin around. The door I had just come through slammed shut, and the air changed. It felt heavier, charged with a sense of foreboding. The laughter returned, skittering through the cracks in my mind. I fought back the urge to scream, focusing instead on the desk. The air crackled again, whispering dark foretelling words. You must paint them out, the voice echoed, a single breath that rattled my bones. Panic filled me again, but I noticed a canvas leaning against the wall, empty and untouched. Was this the answer? If I could capture the truth, if I could bring forth these tormenting faces, maybe they'd stop haunting me. I grabbed a brush, hands shaking with anticipation and fear. Balls of emotion swirled inside me, fear, anger, desperation, and I was drawn to the canvas. As I began to paint, each stroke felt primal, as if the brush was pulling at my soul. The images flowed from me, faces twisted in despair, screaming silently as they were captured. Each one felt familiar. Before I knew it, I was in a trance, the act of painting consuming me. But then, I felt it. The shadows from the corner of the room pressed closer, whispering my name with urgency. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I turned, heart racing. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone was behind me. I spun around, dropping the brush. My heart sank as I took in the figure, that same doppelganger staring back at me, eyes wide with a mixture of torment and triumph. You shouldn't have come here, she snarled, her voice echoing eerily. Now you'll face what you fear the most. The ground trembled beneath my feet, darkness pooling around her, and reality itself began to fracture. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed. That S when everything went dark. When the darkness retreated, I found myself on the floor, gasping for air. The little room was still there, but now it felt different. Empty. I scrambled to a sitting position, heart racing as I looked around. The figure had vanished, but her words echoed in my mind, haunting me like a relentless specter. My instincts screamed at me to get out, but the door that had slammed shut was now ajar. I edged closer, glancing back at the canvas. My pulse raced. What had I painted? Had the doppelganger harmed me? I wasn't sure. I needed answers. I stumbled forward, the floor creaking under my weight. My heart felt like a drum, racing wildly. Peeking around the doorframe, I saw the hallway stretched before me, dark and foreboding. Shadows twisted in the dim light, their forms shifting as if alive. I stepped into the hallway cautiously. Each breath felt strained. The laughter from before still nestled in the back of my mind, a mocking reminder of my own fears. I needed to understand what had happened. There was a flickering light emerging from further down the hall. It drew me in like a moth to a flame. I hesitated before moving toward it, dread knotting in my stomach. But the thought of escaping this labyrinth of horrors pushed me forward. When I reached the end of the hall, I found another room, larger this time. It was filled with more canvases, so many unfinished paintings, each one crucial and vivid. I stepped closer, something compelling me to examine them. Faces of anguish again, but these looked familiar. That's when I noticed one painting that stood apart from the others. It featured a girl, her face blurred, but the expression was unmistakable. Pain, helplessness, and a flicker of hope mixed into one tortured visage. My breath hitched. I recognized her. "Evelyn," I whispered. But how could this be? I had never met her. I stumbled back, head swirling, grappling with questions that battered me like a storm. Who was she, and why was her presence here so potent? As I gripped the edges of the canvas, I felt it again, the shift in the air, heavier this time. A low whispering surrounded me, calling my name, feeding my rising panic. "You cannot escape," it echoed, vibrating through my bones. I turned quickly, looking for the source, but the room was empty. Then, an icy wind swept through, extinguishing the light. I stumbled back, heart pounding even louder. Suddenly, the paint on the canvas began to shift. The blurring intensified, revealing more of the girl's face twisted in agony, her mouth opening wide in an unending scream. Why was this happening? The shadows thickened, cocooning me in darkness. I felt trapped, consumed by fear as reality warped once more. Then, a figure emerged from the void behind me. It was not the doppelganger, but something worse, its presence suffocating. It reached out a hand, beckoning me closer. "You must listen." I stood frozen, caught between fight and flight. The face in the painting was now screaming for help. Then everything went black again. When the darkness receded, panic surged through me like ice water. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust. My surroundings were still eerily quiet, yet I could feel something lurking beneath the surface. A chill crawled down my spine, and instinctively, I reached behind to make sure I wasn't still standing in front of that haunting figure. But there was nothing. Just empty air. With trembling hands, I pushed myself off the floor, glancing around the room in dread. Everything seemed to pulse silently. The unfinished canvases lined the walls, their faces shifting in the dim light, merging into the shadows. The room felt like a prison, every brushstroke growing more grotesque than the last. I hurried to the large window, desperate for clarity. The outside world was shadowed in twilight. I could see pale silhouettes of the trees swaying under the dim light of the moon. I pressed my forehead against the glass, feeling the coolness seep through. Perhaps the darkness couldn't reach me here. But the whispering started again. "You must listen." The voice dripped with urgency, seeming to swirl around me. I spun on my heel, searching for its origin. Was it in my head? Or was something real, something terrifying actually present? Then I spotted a flicker out of the corner of my eye. A flash of color, vibrant against the muted backdrop of despair. I turned to where the painting of Evelyn was, now fully illuminated, her face frozen in a scream, but her eyes widened with something new. Recognition. That's when I saw it, a glimmer underneath the canvas frame. Tentatively, I leaned down to peer closer. My heart dropped. Beneath the edge of the painting, something white was partially concealed. A folded piece of paper. I carefully pulled it out, hands shaking as I unfolded it. The writing was frantic, lines racing across the page like a fire. It read, "Find me. The truth lies within the brush strokes. You must avenge me." My mind raced. Who was she asking for revenge against? I felt sick. The words seemed to echo Evelyn's agony in the painting. But what truth could she mean? I needed answers, but fear weighed heavily. Just then, the laughter returned, this time louder, echoing off the walls. I pressed my back against the wall, the coldness of the paint seeping into my skin. Each giggle felt like a dagger, cutting into the meager sanity I had left. I couldn't stay here. I wouldn't allow myself to be consumed by her despair. Clutching the note tightly, I bolted for the door. As I threw it open, a gust of wind slammed into me, almost as if the room was pushing me back. I stumbled forward into the hallway, but it felt different. Flickering lights danced above me, shadows twisting against the walls. I squinted against the contrasting darkness, and then caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Someone was there watching me. I froze, heart racing again. A figure with a familiar outline stood at the far end of the corridor, motionless. "Evelyn." I whispered, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to dissolve into shadows. My blood ran cold. I could either chase after it or remain paralyzed by fear. Choosing urgency, I took a step forward. As I did, the laughter crescendoed, drowning out my thoughts. I took another step, compelled by something I couldn't explain. What awaited me down the hall, answers or something worse? I couldn't be sure, but I had to find out. I dashed down the hallway, the laughter echoing in my ears, a mocking symphony to my rising panic. Shadows loomed, swallowing me whole. Each step felt heavy, as if the floor beneath me wanted to pull me back, to shackle me to the darkness that now pulsed in every direction. As I reached the end of the corridor, I skidded to a halt. A door loomed before me, old and worn, its surface marred with deep scratches that gave it an unsettling appearance. The laughter faded, replaced by a suffocating silence, pressing in on me from all sides. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. What lay beyond? The figure I'd seen? Or something else, something more sinister? I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. I had to know what Evelyn wanted from me. With shaking fingers, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room beyond was dimly lit. Dim rays of light spilled from a single overhead bulb, illuminating a chaotic array of canvases, brushes, and half-finished paintings. But one canvas caught my eye. It stood alone in the corner, draped in a black cloth. The air felt charged heavy with a sense of dread. I stepped inside, the door creaking ominously behind me. I felt as if I were intruding on something sacred. My heart drummed loudly in my chest, urging me to leave, but I couldn't back down now. I crossed the room, drawn to the shrouded painting. Just as my fingers brushed against the cloth, a chill enveloped me. The air thickened, wrapping around me like a vice. I pulled the cloth off with a sudden jerk, revealing a portrait of Evelyn, not screaming this time, but smiling faintly. It was a stark contrast to the other painting, yet something about her expression felt wrong, hollow. Beneath the canvas, I saw something familiar, a journal, its leather cover cracked and faded. I knelt down, my instincts screaming at me to leave, but curiosity pushed me further. I pried the journal open, flipping through pages filled with Evelyn's scrawled handwriting. At first, it seemed like mundane notes about colors, compositions, and emotions. But then, it shifted to jagged lines of fear. "I see them," I read. "The faces I never made. They're watching me. I can't paint anymore. They want something." My pulse quickened. Who were the faces? Suddenly, the laughter erupted again, sharper this time, as if it were coming from all around me. I looked up, scanning the room for the source. My breath-hitched figures materialized in the shadows, their faces blurred, but their eyes locked onto me, piercing through the darkness. I grabbed the journal tighter, backing away instinctively. It felt like the walls were closing in, and the figures began to advance, their laughter growing louder, drowning out every rational thought. I had to escape again. As I turned to run, a sudden flicker caught my eye. In the dim light, I saw Evelyn's original painting begin to shift. Her eyes pleaded, almost alive, as the figures around me crept closer, hungry for something I couldn't understand. I could feel their desire wrapping around me. "Stay!" the voice commanded, sharp and insistent. My heart raced like a wild animal. I stumbled backward, caught between fleeing and uncovering the truth. Then it hit me, something buried deep within the journal, like a puzzle piece ready to snap into place. I needed to unlock the truth. But could I, before they reached me? The sound of footsteps approached from the doorway. I turned, panic flooding my veins. A familiar silhouette framed the entrance, blocking the way out. "Why did you come here?" the figure asked, voice resonating in the eerie stillness. It was a voice I knew too well. "Evelyn." I barely managed to whisper, fear washing over me anew. But the person standing there didn't look like her. At least, not entirely. "It's time for you to listen," they said, and the shadows shifted around them, closing in. The room pulsed with a new intensity, and I realized then, dreadfully, that I was caught in a game I wasn't ready to play. The figure stepped forward, and I could see their features more clearly now. The eyes were still familiar, but there was a depth in them that felt foreign, twisted. "You don't understand," they said, almost pleading. "This isn't just about me. It's about all of us." I took a step back. "What do you mean?" My voice trembled, filled with a mix of confusion and fear. "Those you saw," they continued, gesturing towards the shadows. "They're bound to the paintings. They want out, and they want you to help them." There before they could finish, the laughter erupted again, drowning out the words and making my chest tighten. I felt as if I were suffocating. The figures shifted, moving closer, their blurry features twisting with insatiable hunger. "No!" I shouted, instinctively raising the journal in front of me as if it could shield me from the encroaching darkness. The words within felt like a lifeline, a connection I couldn't understand yet desperately needed. "What do you want me to do?" Evelyn's eyes softened for a moment, but then the shadows hissed, and her expression hardened, twisting back to something unsettling. "They want to be seen, to be remembered. You can give them life again." The room shook as the shadows began to claw at the edges of reality. I felt the floor tremble, and instinctively I clutched the journal tighter. Flipping through it, I looked for answers, a key to this nightmare. "Wait!" I cried out, but the words seemed to vanish into the darkness. The figures were right in front of me now, their distorted faces reaching out. I could feel their cold breath. It wasn't just fear, it was desperation. Then, just as I thought I would be consumed, a forgotten page caught my eye. It was a drawing, one of those faces. Beneath it, Evelyn had penned a single line, "The sacrifice demands a witness." Before I could process what it meant, a blinding light erupted from the journal. I shielded my eyes as everything around me warped. The shadowy figures recoiled, screeching in pain as they were pulled back, tethered to the canvas, their laughter dissolving into bitter wails. "Do it!" Evelyn's voice ripped through the chaos. "You have to paint them back. Only then can you escape." I blinked, and my surroundings blurred. My heart raced. I had no idea how I could possibly do that. How could I create life from shadows? Panic surged again, but from somewhere deep within me, an ember of determination ignited. With a deep breath, I rushed to the canvases scattered around the room. "Let go!" I shouted at the figures as they flailed, torn between two worlds. "If I can see you, I can free you." I grabbed a brush and began to paint, strokes flooding the canvas with color. I hoped my desperation would translate into life. As I worked, the shadows drew closer, creeping over my shoulder, desperate to be released. Then everything went dark. I stumbled backward, the journal slipping from my hands. I clutched my head, trying to shake off the disorienting void. The room spun, and the shadows embraced me. In that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. Light flickered back to life in a corner of the room, illuminating the portrait of Evelyn. She looked alive, yet something still felt off. I gasped, understanding dawning on me. I had painted the wrong faces, but in doing so, I had awakened something more dangerous. And that was just the beginning. I gasped as the lights flickered back to life, illuminating the chaos I had created. The shadows recoiled slightly, their forms twisting grotesquely, but they didn't retreat entirely. Instead, they remained, echoing with that haunting laughter, a reminder that escape was a far-off dream. I frantically scrambled to regain my composure. The portrait of Evelyn loomed behind me, glowing with an eerie luminescence. I turned toward it, feeling a strange pull and invitation wrapped in danger. There was something unsaid, a connection I couldn't quite grasp. Evelyn's eyes seemed to glint with a mix of desperation and reverence. "You can still release them," she whispered in that voice that was both familiar and foreign. "But you need to understand that freedom comes at a cost." "Freedom?" I echoed, pulling away as dread gripped my stomach. "What do you mean?" Her expression shifted, becoming pained and determined. "The sacrifice demands a witness. You must not only capture their stories, you must bear witness to their suffering. Paint them honestly, utterly. Only then can they be liberated." I hesitated, uncertainty flooding my mind. "But what does that mean for me? What happens to the painter?" The shadows crawled closer, their laughter growing into a cacophony that echoed inside my skull. "You'll bear their burden, just as I have," Evelyn replied. "You'll become the conduit, the truth-teller. They need someone to remember their stories. They need someone who can bear the weight." Panic surged within me. I didn't want more suffering. I wanted to escape this nightmare, not be trapped in it. "Then how can I ever leave?" I shouted, my voice quaking with fear. Evelyn's expression softened, her face shifting from torment to understanding. "In relinquishing their pain, perhaps you'll find your own redemption. Just as I wished for mine." With a sudden rush of determination, I looked towards the blank canvas beside her portrait. I grabbed the brush, my heart pounding as I prepared to face the truth that lay before me. I dipped it into the colors, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. As I painted, each stroke felt like a relentless echo of despair, a tidal wave of memories flooding my senses. The faces shifted before me, their sorrow spilling out in the colors I tried to coax from my mind. I struggled to capture the essence of their anguish, their pleas whispered in the air, echoing through the hollow space. Suddenly, the laughter morphed into sharp cries of anguish, a wave of sound vibrating through the room. The shadows surged forward, their distorted features twisting and writhing cruelly. I hesitated, feeling a quaking terror grip my heart, but then I understood. This was what Evelyn meant. Their pain wasn't theirs alone, it rippled through the very fabric of these walls. I pressed on, fighting the urge to flee as I poured the raw emotions onto the canvas. Each face became clearer, their stories woven into the strokes, and with every movement, the shadows flared and shrank back, as if acknowledging my efforts. But no sooner had I begun than the energy shifted violently. The room trembled as ripples of chaos crashed against my resolve. The shadows seemed to congeal and expand, becoming heavier, thicker, almost tangible. My heart raced as I sensed their struggle, I was losing the momentum. "Evelyn!" I cried out, panic rising. "I need your help." As if answering my plea, her figure flickered beside me, her voice stronger now. "Remember, each face deserves its truth, even if it frightens you. Let go of your fear, and they will be released." With her encouragement, I summoned the courage I thought I lacked. I delved deeper into the painting, bringing forth stories of sorrow and pain, redemption, and suffering. I could see it now, each layer was crucial. The very act of witnessing was enough to twist the sacred bond between artist and creation. But the shadows surged forth again, reaching for me with hollow hands, desperate to drag me under. I stumbled back, but I couldn't give up. Fumbling for the colors, I added more details of their torment. Horrors they had faced, memories that clawed at my soul. Then came the pull, a sudden gust, swirling through the room as the figures began to materialize more vividly. Eyes like amulets dug into my very being. I could hear whispering cries rising around me, begging to be seen and acknowledged. "I will remember you," I shouted amidst the cacophony. "I will bear your pain." In the chaos, the air shimmered like a mirage, and burst forth a wave of luminous energy surged. The shadows writhed in anguish, but slowly, as I captured their essence, they began to dissipate, fading into the light. I felt the weight of countless lifetimes lifted. As the last stroke fell upon the canvas, a distorted yet magnificent visage I watched in awe. The laughter faded into silence, replaced by soft sighs. What did I just do? I whispered, my heart pounding in my ears. Then the shadows receded entirely. The room returned to stillness, quieting for the first time since the chaos began. I stood panting, tears slipping down my cheeks both from trauma and an overwhelming sense of relief. But as I blinked away the haziness, I felt the flicker of something unresolved. Evelyn's portrait, once vibrant, now hung quietly in place, a leaden weight lingering in the air. The burden of knowing was still there, but what now? I felt the chasm of uncertainty yawning in front of me. Did I release them all, or merely shift the burden to myself? I could still be trapped in this reality, one that no one would believe. Could the cycle be broken, or had I merely started anew? I stepped back from the canvas, the echoes of chaos still whispering at the edges of my mind. As I turned away to leave, glancing back at the world I dared to dream, I spotted a small flicker of movement behind the shadows. Emily, the voice was softer now, though hauntingly familiar. I paused, unsure of whether to turn back and confront it, knowing that some truths linger in dark corners, waiting to be faced. And as I stood there in that abandoned factory, I realized some questions would always remain unanswered, lingering along the edges of reality, haunting the twilight between light and shadow. I dared to step forward, embracing the uncertainty ahead, conflicted by the stories still unwritten.